Be inspired by everyday people and household names
who share their struggles, uplifting stories, and insights
with courage and authenticity,
empowering individuals
and the collective
to enhance our health,
expand our horizons,
and treasure the moments of our lives.
I'm Patti Teel.
And I'm Anthony Giannini.
Welcome to Everyday Enlightenment. Welcome to Everyday Enlightenment. Sorry we haven't done a podcast for a while, but Anthony Giannini, my host, has been traveling the world. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, Patti. Good morning.
Good morning. Fun to be doing a podcast again. I want to tell our listeners a little bit about your background because even though you've helped me to interview, or we've interviewed together some interesting guests, there's some things they may not know about you. Anthony is a socio-cultural anthropologist with a specialized research focus in cross-comparative religious studies, mysticism, altered states of consciousness, and shamanism. He is working to bring indigenous, innovative, traditional, and yet revolutionary holistic healing methods into the mainstream. Anthony is an applied cultural anthropologist, frequently traveling to Peru in order to study indigenous shamanic healing practices. Anthony recently returned from a visit in the Andes Mountains of Peru, where he was visiting an indigenous Chero native community at an elevation of over 5,000 meters. Anthony is a musician, artist, and travel guide, offering a practical approach to education, wellness, and spirituality. I'm so happy to be working with him. Welcome, Anthony.
Hey, Patti. Well, I'm glad to be back here with our listeners, doing another episode of Everyday Enlightenment with you, especially. Such a wonderful broadcaster you are, and such a grand introduction to my work. And, you know, what excites me so much about Everyday Enlightenment is all the fantastic guests that we have, and I feel privileged to be able to share my story, my passions as well on this show. So that's a great introduction. And as you mentioned, we haven't done an episode in a while, so I'm really excited to get back into the internet, providing content for people so they can follow along with my travels and what I've been up to. So for me, you know, as an anthropologist, I went to university at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona. And like a lot of students, we study anthropology to research and learn. And there's different ways you can study anthropology, whether it's cultural or physical. And I went with cultural anthropology. And I always thought maybe I would teach in a university or something like that. But it wasn't until after I graduated college that I realized I needed to get my master's degree if I wanted to be a teacher. And so I was in a pickle a little bit as a young college graduate needing to make a living for myself. So I never would have thought that I would become an entrepreneur.
Well, I'm so glad that you have become an entrepreneur. And we met, Anthony and I, when we worked together at a retreat center in Sedona. And I think you probably had just graduated college, so you were a very young man, and you started doing some sound healing. So that was our first adventure together.
It seems like so long ago, and it wasn't really that long ago, but a lot can happen in just a few short years. And that really set the stage for me in terms of my interests, my spiritual interests, and what I could consider what I would want to do for the rest of my life or consider some kind of career. So I was in Sedona as a spiritual practitioner working at a Korean style Taoist meditation center and learning sound healing, and also living among the Sedona people who, as you know, can have many spiritual ideas and various spiritual businesses built around the context of the Sedona energy vortex. So it's a great place to do applied anthropology in the field. And as an entrepreneur and somebody with an interest in podcasting, I started my own podcast based on my experience in Sedona. And I like to call myself a mysterious claims investigator because going around Sedona, so many people have a lot of mysterious claims. They say that they have contacted extraterrestrials, or they see auras, or they're psychic. And so for me as an anthropologist, it's a really good way to study cultures, study people, study individuals, and also a mystical experience and altered states of consciousness, which was my research focus in school.
How fascinating. Well, I, for one, am enjoying watching and hearing all the adventures that you're having. And I imagine you've had your own mystical experiences as well. But let's first start with your recent trip to the Andes Mountains.
Yeah, thanks. Well, it was a good trip. I spent about 2 months in the Andes outside of Cusco and the Sacred Valley area, and also in the mountains with the indigenous Quero native community. I had taken a lot of trips to Peru over the last 5 years, mostly to the Amazon jungle to study about plant medicine. And I've lived with various tribes and studied different shamanic traditions and different lineages. So the jungle is really hot and humid, and life there is a lot different than our air-conditioned homes in the United States, for example. And it's pretty hot and humid. And last year I spent 5 months in the jungle, and that was quite an experience. However, this time I was really relieved and happy to go to Peru to spend time in the Andes Mountains at a much higher elevation. Cusco is about 12,000 feet in elevation, and so it's pretty high and it's pretty cold there, and it's not humid at all, and it's frigid, which is a relief, because when you're in the jungle you're sweating all the time, constantly, and you're always hot. And I thought that was just what Peru was like, but it turns out the Andes, for me as a mountain man living in Arizona and Colorado, I love the weather of the Andes. And so I was really thrilled and relieved to go somewhere where I wasn't so sweaty all the time.
I bet you were. And I'm sure it was very, very beautiful.
Wow, yeah, it's incredible there. And there's so much history in Cusco, in the city itself, being built on an ancient Incan empire, essentially. And then the Spaniards coming in and doing their conquest and building their Catholic churches directly on top of the ancient Incan temples. So you have this really layered, staggered style of history where there's ancient history, and then there's more modern history with the conquistadors, and then there's modern life now. So you have a mix of the indigenous Incan ancestors, the people that live in Cusco, and then their ancestors maybe are mixed with the Spanish lineage and the conquistadors. And then in the modern world, of course, you have, industrialized life and things like Starbucks now that are built inside of these ancient Incan temples, even, for example. So it's
Oh,
really,
wow. I
really
would
interesting.
never have dreamed that. That's really interesting.
I guess that's the American dream and Western expansion in
Hmm.
all summed up.
So I know you were with a group of 13 people. I imagine that was including you. Would you say they're all spiritual seekers?
We had a group. So our group was taking a hike to the Quero Nation, and the Quero indigenous people are the last remaining Incan ancestors, and they've carried an unbroken spiritual tradition for over 500 years. And what happened basically was that the Spanish conquistadors came and conquered the Incan Empire and slaughtered millions and millions of people. And the Incan ancestors had no chance or no choice but to retreat to the high elevation, the high altitudes in the Andes Mountains, the secluded areas where the Spanish weren't able to find them and conquer them. So we went to visit the Queros, the indigenous people who are living still in the Andes at over 16,000 feet elevation. And we had a group that was accompanied by an anthropologist who works with the Quero communities as an intermediary between the government and also the Quero indigenous people. And then we were led by our guide, Don Gino Chacaruna, who's my teacher, who's a Peruvian shaman, And then we had about 13 other people who were from Germany and the United States as well. So Westerners and various physical shape. Some people were in not great physical shape, other people were in good shape. But they told us, get ready because we're going to go to 16,000 feet. We're going to hike, 4 or 5 hours into the mountains, and we're going to not really have too many modern accommodations. So I was kind of expecting that, and I'm a pretty fit guy, and I was ready for anything, and I did pretty good on the hike, I'd say. But let's just say we underestimated the hike and what it was that we were going to encounter on the actual hike, and the level of isolation at the village was far greater than we thought. So our hike started, and we took maybe a 3-4 hour drive up in the Andes to over 16,000 feet. And then it's basically the end of the road at the top of the most distant mountain, and that's where they dropped us off.
Oh
So
my goodness. That is like something that could be in a movie. That is so amazing. 16,000 feet. Did anyone get altitude sickness?
yeah, we had various layers of challenges within the group, physical issues, also issues of culture and sort of getting adjusted to life at
Hmm.
such a different extreme environment. So I want to show you a video now of what it was like when at the top of the road where we got out of the van, so you could just see and feel the sort of hiking conditions that we were up against when we got before we started the hike, really. Yeah, so we just got to the top of the road, and everyone's unpacking our stuff with our van, and we said, "Are you serious? We're really gonna go hiking right now?"
How cold was it, Anthony?
It was pretty cold, I'd say. I mean, what you see there is
It looks very cold in the photo.
it's sleet and rain and snow, and they said be very careful. You don't want to inhale really cold air. Keep breathing really cold air because it might freeze your lungs, or really more so put a lot of moisture and cold air into your lungs, which isn't good.
Wow, that really gives us an idea of how isolated an area. And that's where you started the hike, if I understand you.
That's the start of the hike. And
Wow.
so the Caro people, they hiked, 3 or 4 hours from their village to meet our van before they met us, and then led us 3 or 4 hours back on a hike back to their home, back to their village. So they were our guides or our Sherpas in the mountains. And you wouldn't want to be anywhere in that general vicinity without some of the indigenous elders guiding your trip, obviously, because the conditions are so extreme and the land can be so tumultuous.
Treacherous, yes. What kind of animals do you run into? Wolves and bears and things like that?
They have pumas
Oh,
up there, and also llamas,
mm-hmm.
alpacas, and
Ah,
those are the domesticated animals, the
I
llamas,
see.
alpacas. They raise them for their well-being and their livelihood, not only for their soft fur, but also for the food and the sustenance.
Wow. So I know that ceremonial life is very important to the Kiro people, as I understand it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'd like to say that our guide was an elder named Taita Asensio, and he is 82 years old. He's born and raised in the Karo tradition. So he spent his whole life living in different villages of the Karos, all very similar to this in high altitude. And so he was a really remarkable guy because he could out hike me and all of the other young guys on the trip. And he's 82 years old. So
82 years old. That is amazing. We all hope to be that way at 82 years old. That is fascinating. So, do you feel like that's a combination of just living outdoors and exercising, and it must be the way he eats as well, and his spirituality?
yeah, it's a combination of no stress or at least only stress in terms of survival and focusing on what's important in order to survive.
So they have a different kind of stress. It's more just making sure they stay alive and survive, which of course is stressful, but it's not the same as worrying about paying your bills and the kind of stress that we Westerners have to deal with. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say so, definitely. And the nature is so pure there. The energy of the land, the water, there's literally streams everywhere that you could just drink from. There's little trouts in the river that taste so good. And mostly they eat alpaca and potatoes because actually there's not a lot of them, a lot of different food to choose from up there. So they're very limited with their resources and in a lot of different ways. But their lifestyle is centered around spirituality, centered around their sacred regard for the apus, which are the mountain spirits, because to them, the Mother Earth is alive, the Pachamama is alive, the Mother Earth, and Taita Inti, Padre Sol, the Father Son, is also sustaining their life as a living spiritual being. And because of these two sort of yin and yang essences, the sun and the moon, the earth is alive, and then so are the mountains and the apus, the great spirits, the guardian spirits of the mountains on which they live, and everything like the water, the animals, the plants are an extension of the living essence, the living spiritual essence of the mountain, the apu. So they live very in connection with life and nature as animated, as alive, as a being that they give thanks to and they give offerings to. So a lot of their ceremonies and their entire life also revolves around the coca leaf, which is sacred to the Incans, because you can imagine when the Incans 1,000 years ago were being run into the mountains by the Spanish conquistadors, they were limited in their food, their access to resources, and they found that the coca leaf gives them energy. When they chew it, it gives them energy, it connects them spiritually. They don't feel hungry, they don't feel thirsty when they chew coca leaf. And it turns out that there's more vitamins, minerals, and protein, as well as calcium in the coca leaf than any other food on earth. So actually, coca is one of the most nutritious foods on the entire planet. And one of the really sad things about traditional people around the world is that their culture and their practices are demonized or misrepresented or misunderstood. And coca leaf is one example of that, because people think of cocaine when they think of coca leaf and all the bad things that cocaine does for people. But actually, coca leaf and cocaine couldn't be further from each other. And it's very important to make that distinction, especially because people in the West have such a not a good idea about what coca leaf is, even though in Cusco it's totally normal to use coca and they view it as a food, but it's misrepresented. So we have to understand that the coca leaf is central to their life, their spirit, and also their physical well-being and health. And I think that's one of the reasons why Taita Asensio is 82 years old, full of so much vitality, life force, because he's spiritually connected to the mountains, but he's also eating the traditional food of his ancestors, which is something like a spiritual superfood.
Wow, well, that coca leaf sounds amazing. Is there a way to get it in the United States?
No, it's illegal in the United States.
Oh, it is.
And
It's not a hallucinogenic, though, is it? I mean, you describe it, it gives you energy, it's healthy.
no, it's very much sobering and straightening. It focuses you, gives you energy, gives you nutrition. And it's only demonized because of cocaine, and it's mostly illegal in a lot of parts of the world because of
Hmm.
its association, and also because of the suppression of indigenous people, which is a much grander, broader problem in terms of westernization and uh, getting people to have the industrialized mindset.
Yeah, and perhaps the drug companies wouldn't be very happy to have it available either, since they're all about making money. And if people found benefit from it, I don't mean to be so negative about them, but that would be a suspicion.
There's a lot of suspicions out there, and I don't know. We just trust the Pachamama, the Mother Earth, and we trust our own intuition. And also, we look into the indigenous people and the way that they've carried their traditions for thousands of years based on how their ancestors have lived. And I don't know if indigenous people have been living the same lifestyle for thousands of years and they're living long lives, then I think we have a lot to learn because they are really applying their knowledge, and science sometimes can be largely speculation. We don't really know so much when we reduce things scientifically, but if we see how it's applied to daily life, and we see this through the lineages of ancestral indigenous people, then we know that these ways of life, they work.
Right. Wow, this trip sounds like it was life-changing.
So I'd like to show a video now of Taita Sensio because he is playing the flute for us as we are about to start our hike.
Un poquito más.
Yes, it is beautiful. It seems so very ceremonial, just kind of marking the occasion that you're ready to start this hike and that this is really important.
Yes, it is ceremonial, and what he's doing is playing the flute for the Apus, the mountain spirits, asking permission for us to pass, asking for safe passage, and us to be guided through this treacherous hike. And you can see in this next video here how treacherous it really is, because as we turn this corner after hiking about almost 2 hours, we can start to see what we're up against. And they said, we're going to go climb that mountain up there. I said, are you kidding?
Wow, no path. You're just climbing up the mountain.
Oh no, we're on a path, but
Oh, good.
it's the path they use to get to and from the village. And
I see.
they also carry a lot of our stuff with alpacas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an alpaca pass, and they don't let horses pass around these areas too much because the horses can damage the topsoil with their hooves. So only horses are allowed on special occasions for few people that might have challenges hiking in. And so maybe we had 2 or 3 horses.
Wow. I'm so happy that you're sharing this with us. I had no idea what your adventure was like, and this, especially with the visual, really gives us a good understanding.
Well, maybe you're going to want to come next year.
Better get in shape, Anthony.
So
But I would love to.
Here's another video of our hike as we are about to climb over the summit of this pass. So I said, wait, that's a guy up there and we're going to go that way? I don't know about this. And yeah, so I'd like to share this next video of one of the women that was guiding us on our hike. She's one of the elders of the village, and she sings a ikaro, a sacred medicine song to the mountain spirits to grant us passage as well, because it was snowing a little bit at this time and a few people were having trouble breathing, so they were using the cans of oxygen. And we're all chewing coca leaf as well on the hike because it helps with blood circulation and blood oxygenation also. So she's singing to these apus here, the sacred mountains, and each peak has its own entity, its own spiritual guardian called an apu. And there's many, many apus around the region. So based on where the person lives, they're acquainted with the apus in different ways, and they hold them in high regard as sacred guardians for their life.
That's very beautiful. Yeah.
So there she is, the two women that were guiding us, and they were remarkable, the women in the Caro community, because they were raising their children at the altitude up there too. So the kids were really resilient, really strong, really fun and playful, but definitely really strong. You know, they speak mostly Quechua, which is their native indigenous language, with a little bit of Spanish, but some of them, depending on how much they've been traveling to Cusco or the surrounding towns, they know a little bit of Castellano, traditional Spanish, classical Spanish, but mostly they speak Quechua. And we had the privilege of working with a few guides that were, including our anthropologist who speaks Quechua, Spanish, and a little bit of English. So that was really helpful. And we were learning different Quechua phrases and the significance of the Quechua language. And Quechua is one of the languages that the Incan people traditionally were speaking. So it's very old and connected to not only the Incans, but a lot of indigenous people in the entire Amazon basin. And it's still very well spoken, but as all languages can be endangered.
Gee, Anthony, I am so happy that you're sharing this with us. You know, we like to think that the world is so connected, you know, via internet and things, but it sounds like this is a little more than a little off the beaten track, and you really can't learn about it unless you actually go there in an intimate way.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And that's why I love my job. And that's why I call myself an applied anthropologist, because in terms of anthropology and understanding life on this planet in both a very personal way, as it's unique to each person, but also in a collective way or a universal way, searching for the common meaning for every person, we have to go and sort of walk a mile in the shoes of other people. And that's what I love to do as an anthropologist, because I like to go and explore, and also why I call myself a mysterious claims investigator, because certain people are living their life in a certain way or experiencing various things, and it can be really interesting to know that whatever you normally experience, there could be somebody else's normal, which is vastly different.
Vastly different. I'm so glad you decided to do this kind of studying, experiential traveling, and meeting people rather than going for your master's just straight out of college. This seems like it has to just teach you so much more.
Yeah, it's all relative. And it's fun to communicate with the Caros as well, because you know, it can be challenging for outsiders to come to different indigenous villages, people that live in isolation. Different native communities have different reactions to outsiders, and some of them are willing to share their knowledge. Many times they're not so willing to share their knowledge with just anybody, because outsiders aren't well trusted sometimes. And understandably, we can relate to that and appreciate why they feel this way, or why the sacred knowledge is guarded and protected. And one of the reasons why the Caros are inviting people now to come to their communities, even in spite of the Corona age, when everyone's living in isolation and they could be very fearful of the coronavirus coming to their village, they still see how important it is for them to disseminate their knowledge and share with the rest of the world, because the Incans have a prophecy called the prophecy of the eagle and the condor. And long ago, it said that the eagle and the condor both flew in the same sky. And the knowledge of rationality and logic and reason was represented by the eagle, and the understanding of the heart and the intuition was represented by the condor. So the mind and the heart were working in and flowing together at some point in the ancient past. And more recently, the world has sort of gone a different direction and people have lost touch with themselves. And so the eagle flies in North America and the condor flies in South America, meaning that a lot of science and breakthroughs in technology are happening in North America and through industrialization, but also the condor is mostly alive in South America through the way of the shaman and the path of the heart, and through the culture of dance and tradition and music. So it's embedded in the Karo indigenous people that the eagle and the condor will once again fly in the same sky. So it's been foretold that the ancient teachings will come again to the forefront in the modern world, mixed with logic and reason, but also intuition and spiritual knowledge through the power of love to unite humanity and give us awakening as we move into the future. So we really are living that prophecy by coming to the village here and learning from the Karo people, very respectful of them and the way that they live their life, and their willingness to share their knowledge with us, to outsiders, was truly remarkable and very humbling.
Yes, and what a delicate balance too. I know you shared with me that on some level, while our influence and resources are good, we don't want to destroy the amazing cultural and natural community balance that these people have. So that's always something you have to take into account.
It's true. It's true. And anthropologists have always kind of struggled with this as we move into modernization, and indigenous people are sort of moved to reservations in the United States, for example. And the government says maybe the native communities need this, maybe they need electricity, running water, toilets. And the anthropologist representing the indigenous community says, well, maybe we want some resources that are going to help us with our impoverished situation, but we don't want too much government assistance. We don't want too many toilets, for example. So yeah, I want to touch back on that topic. I'd like to share now a picture of the Karo community so you can see their living conditions and what it's like, because they have stone huts and straw roofs and dirt floors just with straw on the bottom. So it's really cool because you almost can't even see their houses unless you look.
Right, I see that. At first I was like, where are they? But they are, yeah, that's so interesting. Such a different way of life. But back to nature, up with the sun, down with the sunset, I guess.
Yeah, so they wake up super early, even before sunrise, and they go to bed pretty much when the sun goes down. And it's a totally different lifestyle. And I was really surprised because they don't necessarily have a lot of fires up there, like their fireplaces. They use fire to cook, but wood is a really scarce resource there. There's no trees that grow anywhere. So they have to take wood in from the nearest villages, which are a 3 or 4 hour hike. And they have to haul wood in from alpacas, and it's very laborsome and very expensive also. So they have limited wood, limited resources to actually create fire and keep them warm. So they just make alpaca clothes, textiles, ponchos, and they also dry out the alpaca dung and they use it as fire starter also.
Wow, nothing goes to waste.
Nothing goes to waste. Everything is used.
Mhm.
Everything is respected and honored. For example, we ate an alpaca when we were there, and I'm a lifelong vegetarian, vegan, and they killed an alpaca for us. So I found it was a good opportunity for me to try alpaca, which is really delicious. I recommend to anybody. And we even found some good restaurants in Cusco that sell alpaca. But we had really fresh alpaca up there because one of the mornings we could hear one of the alpacas were slaughtered for us, a special offering to our group. And within a couple hours, we were eating alpaca for lunch.
Wow. What an experience, Anthony. I just am so grateful that you shared it with us. You must have had so many takeaways. It's hard to ask you what you gained most from this experience, but I might put you on the spot to try. What was the main takeaway from this amazing experience?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that the earth that we live in is alive, just like we are alive. We don't question that. If I say that the earth is a living organism, science might try to dissect that and say, what do you mean? Maybe there's living organisms on the earth, but is the earth itself alive? People have a lot of debate about that scientifically. However, if I said, are you alive? People would not doubt. Yes, of course I'm alive. What kind of question is that? So we need to understand that the earth itself is a living being and that our life depends on the balance of this greater living being that we live within. And also, we are dependent on the elements for our life. An extension of the Mother Earth, the Pachamama, are the elements, which are earth, wind, fire, and water. And our bodies are composed of those elements in different degrees and quantities. And it's really the balance of those elements that give us good health, good wellness, good understanding, and living well. So all of my work that I do, learning from indigenous traditional cultures, traditional practices, is to summarize and make a synopsis of the commonalities between different cultures and different ways of life around the world. And all of this is for me to learn about what is the right way to live, or what does it mean to live well. Both for me, as an individual, what makes a good life for me, but also universally speaking, is there some kind of wellness that we can all strive for and we can all agree upon? So I learned a lot on this trip, and mostly I'm thankful to be back in the desert where the sun is shining and I'm warm. It was very cold there. We didn't see the sun for a few days, and some people had very wet shoes and things like that. So you don't dry off when there's no sun.
Right. The creature comforts are nice, that's for sure. But I'm so glad you had such an amazing opportunity. And I thank you so very much for sharing it today with our listeners. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Patti. Thank you for having me on the show. There's so much more that I would like to share, and will share in other podcasts or other episodes.
Yeah, definitely, because we're learning a lot. I had no idea what the living conditions were like there and how these amazing people have kept their traditions and spirituality alive, and how honoring they are of Puchamama.
Yeah, they are remarkable people with a strong spirit. And so you can just put yourself in their shoes and put yourself in the shoes of your ancestors who lived the more natural ways not so long ago,
Mhm.
and understand that the human spirit is resilient. People are resourceful, people are strong, and you have to believe in yourself and you have to cultivate strength in order to face yourself and face the elements. So that's really the meaning of life and what gives us real power on this world and our connection to life. And I'm really grateful for so many of my teachers who have demonstrated this power in a real way, in a practical way that gives my life more meaning.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And we look forward to you sharing more in future episodes. Really appreciate you.
Thanks, Patti. I'd like to introduce my website as well. It's called holisticlivingonline.com, and we're building an online community full of different holistic health practitioners and people that are into various perspectives about wellness. So if you'd like to follow my journey a little bit more, you can sign up at holisticlivingonline.com. And also, I have a podcast called the Aura of Truth radio show. If you'd like to learn more about my life in Sedona and my life and work as an applied anthropologist, you can tune into my podcast at soundcloud.com/aura of truth.
Well, I'll be tuning in. Sounds wonderful, Anthony. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patti. Until
Bye-bye.
next time.
Till next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Everyday Enlightenment. To subscribe, listen to past episodes, or if you'd like to be featured on Everyday Enlightenment, visit hubforpodcasting.com.